They're going to be slaves. They're going to be working out in the field.
Say it's not going to be a relationship of.
Now, you may have these other nations be cooks and butlers and all that, but Esau is going to be out there, and they're going to be in hardcore slavery. Ultimately, all of them are going to be under our feet.
Hate or unrighteous. It just has to do with basically what jobs you're able to have in the kingdom, things like that. Whereas, of course, we know GMS and especially like Sakari and ISUPK, they talk about hardcore slavery and bondage and whipping people day and night and stuff like that. And some even talk about, raping the women and whatever. Or not all.
That's also in the scriptures. That's in the law. Deuteronomy, what is that? Deuteronomy 21, verse 10. Let's go to that. That's one of the laws of the Most High. All basic information. Not one jot or one tittle shall no way pass from the law. Or the law will not be done away with. The law will be honored and practiced in the kingdom. Okay, it says here, Deuteronomy 21 verse 10, the headline is domestic relations. When thou goest forth to war against thine enemies, the other nations, and the Lord Yahweh, the Most High, have delivered them into thine hands, and thou hast taken them captive, and seest among the captives, the slaves, because you took them down in war, a beautiful woman, and hath of another nation, and have a desire unto her, that thou wouldest have her to thy wife. Now she doesn't have a say in the matter. Excuse me. Then, so there's a procedure, which is the law, 12 verse. Then thou shalt bring her home to thine house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall put the remnant of her captivity from off her, and shall remain in thine house, and bewail her father and her mother, because obviously her father and the mother were killed in this war, a full month. And after that, thou shalt go in unto her, meaning have sex with her, whether she likes it or not. If she doesn't like it, it's too bad. She's going to be forced to have sex with you. The slave man, the slave master. See, Esau doesn't like this, man. And Vocab is trying like hell to hope like it never comes to pass. It's going to come to pass. Isaiah the 14th chapter is yet to come to pass. Mainly we're dealing with the first two verses. And be her husband, whether she likes it or not, and she shall be thy wife. And ultimately she'll settle down, and she'll know. And even the scriptures, I did a video where I believe it was Gideon. Matter of fact, I'm sure it was Gideon that had children through his concubines, through his slaves. So did Solomon. So I'm giving the scriptures vocab.
All, but some, or having sex slaves of the other nations. So you're saying something.
I just read it.
Different. But could I ask you one thing about that? I don't know if you've ever heard this, and maybe you would say no. I don't think that's a proper interpretation of vocab. But I would just be curious what you would say about this passage. I'll show you real quick here. Do you remember in in Ezra chapter 1. You remember Ezra? And you remember when they were returning back? You remember they were returning back?
Yeah, that was after the captivity of the Babylonians.
Coming back to Israel after being in captivity for a really long time.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anyone point to those verses and say, well, they did have like servants and stuff there?
He just said it. They did have servants, meaning before the Babylonians took them over, when the Babylonians took them over, they had servants. Let's jump up to from that point in history up until now, this present time. You have Jakes out there and that's under Esau's system that have people work for him, and an employer-employee relationship is that of a servant and someone higher than them, a master, so to speak.
Of Isaiah 14. Since Isaiah 14, of course, was written before Ezra. Have you ever heard anyone use that?
No, I don't. I never heard nobody use that.
No?
Let me say this. Let
me show you just one verse. I just want to show you one verse. So this is Ezra chapter 2. And again, and I'm brother, I don't want to. I hope we don't spend too much time on it, because we have a lot to talk about, and we're allowed to disagree as men. It's okay, you know what I'm saying. But like, just one thing. It's just something to consider for you. It's Ezra chapter 2. They're coming back. They're returning, and if you read Ezra 2, it says all the people that Cyrus let come back. These are exiles who are now returning, right? And there's a list of exiles who return. It's a big old list filled with names.
Yeah. So after Babylon was taken down, you had Cyrus, you had Darius, that gave the order for the king of Babylon at that time to be, taken down, killed. There was a surgical strike. So at that time, Israel had servants. They were under the Babylonians at that time, but they still had servants. And when they went back to Jerusalem, they had brought their servants with them.
And then as you get towards the end, it names some very interesting things that are with them. And I just want to read a little bit of this, just something for you to consider. Ezra chapter 2, starting in verse 64. The whole company numbered 42,360. Besides,
the whole company represents Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, the kingdom of Judah.
There's 7,337 male and female slaves. They also had 200 male and female singers. They also had 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,700.
So he's going to say, as you listen on, that this is a fulfillment of Isaiah, the 14th chapter, which is not. Isaiah, the 14th chapter, is yet to be fulfilled.
20 donkeys. When they arrived at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of the families gave freewill offerings toward the rebuilding of the house of God on its site. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury for this work 61,000 derricks of gold, 5,000 minas of silver, and 100 priestly garments. The priests and Levites and musicians and gatekeepers and temple servants settled in their towns, along with some of the other people, and the rest of the Israelites settled in their towns. So the reason I bring that up is because they returned to Israel with slaves or servants, depending on which translation you look at. And it seems very likely that could be a fulfillment of Isaiah 14, 1 and 2. Just something to consider. But go ahead, I'll let you...
No, that's not the fulfillment of that. Isaiah 14, 1 and 2 is yet to come to pass. Let's go to Isaiah 14, 1 and 2. It said, for the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel. This is the fulfillment of the whole nation coming together and set them in their own land, and the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. Now the strangers are talking about the rest of Israel. The 7 used to teach it. That was talking about the other nations. No, it's talking about the rest of Israel. And the people shall take them and bring them to their place. And the house of Israel, meaning there's not going to be 2 kingdoms, northern and southern. The kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah is going to be one kingdom. And the house of Israel shall, and we read that in Isaiah 11, the 11th chapter, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. And the oppressors start with Edom and the rest of the nations. And it shall come to pass in that day, and the day that the Lord shall give them rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear, and from the hard bondage wherein they were made to serve. So the rest is the kingdom. There yet remaineth a rest for Israel. So did we not go into captivity after the Babylonian captivity? After the Medo-Persian captivity? After the Greeks, the Romans? So what the hell are you talking about, Vocab?
Do you have the last word on that to make sure we don't get bogged down in that?
Well, if you look on this side of the earth, and even during the time of the disciples were under Roman occupation. They were under Roman slavery. And even in today's market, like when you look at companies like Amazon, you have...
Yeah, I'm going to close on that. Anyway, it's on to the next one. Shalom.